Hey everybody, and welcome to the show. I'm James, that's Katie, and that makes this the Circles and Squares news report for Monday, June 13th, 2022, part of the Circles and Squares podcast experience, as all of our products are here at Circles and Squares. Kate, good morning, good afternoon, how are you today?
Good morning, good morning. You know what? I'm having a hell of a day. I'm having one of those days this morning where just like everything seems to be not working quite properly. And, like, I'm gonna try not to be too negative this show, but like, ooh, like I could fight someone right now.
Look,
Like,
I feel you. I was just making a freezer pizza for lunch before this show, and I burned the shit out of the back of my hand. And I don't know, like, the pizza wasn't worth it. Like, my hand is in quite a bit of pain right now, but you know what? The podcast must go on.
That's not worth it. It's a good thing you didn't have my part of the experience this morning, because I sat down, I was like, I got an hour free time, I'm gonna relax with some Elden Ring, good me time before all the shit I gotta get done today. And I think like the USB cord I was using to play with my PS4 controller on PC is like getting fucked. And so I was like partway through a fight, and then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, the controller just at 100% intensity just started vibrating, and it wouldn't stop. It's like, you cannot play like that. Like, your hands almost go instantly numb because it's just so
The amount of
intense.
energy you need to use to just grip the controller is...
Right? Like, it was not that intense of an enemy I was fighting, but like, holy shit. So, instead of playing some relaxing Elden Ring, it was some not relaxing tech support, and it was awful.
Perfect. Well, you know what? It's a good thing we're both in a great mood to start the show today, because we have a lot of stuff to talk about, Kate. This, of course, is our news show, and we're going to be talking about a lot of news today because we just had Jeff Keighley's big Summer Game Fest showcase, as well as the Devolver Showcase to talk about, and some little PlayStation tidbits in there as well. So we're going to get into all that in just a minute. I just wanted to remind everybody, though, just because the state of play that Sony did last week came out, in a weird time of our recording schedule, we ended up going over our thoughts on that little bit of news on our last episode of the regular show. So that would be last week. You can go and see what we thought of state of play on that show. So there will be no news from that here. We're just going to cover the stuff that's happened since. But before we get into the Summer Games Fest announcements, there was a bit of PlayStation news we'll start off with, which is that PS Plus for June was announced since our last episode. And it's an interesting collection of games, because headlining the whole thing, we have God of War 2018, which is like, the greatest thing to come to PS Plus of all time if you've never played it before. And along with that, we have Naruto to Boruto Shinobi Striker. That's an interesting title because, as I understand it, Boruto is Naruto's son. So Naruto to Boruto, it's kind of weird. Maybe it's saying like from the start to when Boruto was born. I don't know.
That makes sense.
And then thing. Yeah, and then finally we have Nickelodeon All-Star Brawl, a game which I'm sure is, a nice 6.5 or 7 out of 10, but I'm going to really look forward to playing some rounds of that with you before our next episode to talk about.
Yeah, absolutely. No beating on the bush. Like, that's 100% the game we're playing this month. Like, I am stoked to play All-Star Brawl, and like, we played God of War, so we can just skip right past that. Like, Batman v SpongeBob, here we go.
Yeah, Batman v SpongeBob. Is there a character that's really sticking out that you would love to play as?
You know what? I don't even think I've looked up a character list. I think there's like some Avatar stuff in there.
I actually don't know. For me, I'm just thinking I want to be Leonardo, because I know he's in the game, and it's just going to get me excited for Ninja Turtles next week.
Yeah, that's pretty.
But you can also be like Reptar from Rugrats. I think that'd be pretty fun.
Yeah, he's on there. Yeah, so they've got Aang and Toph from the OG Avatar, and then they've also got Korra. So like, I 100% I think we'll rock some Toph.
Nice.
But yeah, they got a lot of turtles. Nigel Thornberry's in
Nigel
there.
Thornberry, yeah.
You gotta play as him.
I think
it's just such a bizarre cast.
I feel like Nigel Thornberry is Nickelodeon's version of Waluigi.
Absolutely.
Like they have the same energy.
If he's not crotch chopping, this game is gonna flop. But like, he's gotta bring that kind of energy for sure.
All right. Well, we'll play Nickelodeon All-Star Brawl for next episode, and we'll get back to everyone on that. Just one other thing to go on about quickly for PlayStation before we talk about other stuff is that there's been a lot of news around Ragnarok and its release date. There was a leak online late last week saying the game had been delayed to next year, which I think for a lot of us wouldn't have been a surprise. But now there's a report coming on GameSpot, I think, which was reported initially by Jason Schreier of Bloomberg, that God of War has a release date planned for November. And that's actually still the case, and the game hasn't been delayed. So a bit of conflicting information, but whenever we hear from Jason Schreier, I'm always kind of inclined to believe what he has to say. He seems to have some good sources. And if that's the case, then, I mean, November ain't so far away for Ragnarok.
Yeah, I mean, that'd be pretty hype. I think there's also a possibility that November was the intended original release date and we still get a delay from then.
Yeah, it's far from a guarantee, I think, but I don't know. Apparently it says it's on schedule in the article here, and they're, quote unquote, heads down, hard at work, is like, that's like the generic line you hear all the time in these things. But I mean, I really hope it hits November. That would be great. And especially because I feel like we don't really have that big kind of fall end of the year game right now. I mean, we'll see in the showcase there was some announcements, obviously the spoiler for the end of talking about Summer Games Fest, like the Last of Us remake. But I mean, as someone that's already played The Last of Us a couple times, and like, I don't know if that's exactly what I'm looking for. So Ragnarok would of course be like the perfect thing.
Exactly. They really have a big Christmas game, and they also don't really have like a ton of big PS5 games at all. So just kind of adding some more of that library would be great. Kratos is obviously like potentially the biggest game that could come for PS5 right now, and you know what? I just want to see a trailer. Like that's what I care about the most. Like, release date is awesome. Like, obviously the sooner the better. But at the same time, like, I just want to see a trailer, and I'm complacent. That's fine.
Just show me Kratos grabbing some guy by the neck and like slamming him into the floor. Like, I just want to see that just for a second. I just want to see.
Exactly. I want to see what loincloth he's got on in this installment.
Yeah, and like what kind of belt he has around his huge biceps and all that stuff.
Exactly. And I want to know how old Boy is. Like, does Boy have a beard yet? Probably not. But like, how close should we
I feel like the beard. I feel like the beard, no, but he will be like,
right.
older.
But like, is he gonna be like scraggly? Like, he's got like a little bit of like a mustache. You can't really grow one yet.
Yeah,
like,
we'll see.
Yeah,
we'll see. What's your bet? I say no.
I say no on Boy. I say no. I say he's still a little too young.
Okay. Well, we'll check back on that too. But for now, Kate, let's get into recapping Summer Games Fest and everything we saw from Jeff Keighley's show. Overall thoughts on the presentation. Spoilers, I think it was a bit of a letdown. But what did you think overall of the presentation? Was it what you were hoping for? How did you view the showcase as a whole?
Yes, I hate being the negative one because I'm normally the person that's like, well, just because it wasn't for you, like there's still cool stuff for everyone else. But I think like, especially compared to last year, which might be unfair because last year was just like an S+ tier showcase. Like, it was outrageous how good last year's was. And I felt like last year was like every like third thing was like, holy shit, that's new and cool. Holy shit, that's new and cool. And then I felt like this one was a lot of like stuff we've already seen before, but also not gameplay. So there just wasn't a hell of a lot of things that were new or surprising in any sense of the term. And like, there were a few cool things. There's stuff I'm excited for, but overall it just felt really lackluster. Like, it was missing a lot of the energy that previous showcases have had.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. I think that it had a few big things for sure. There was some cool stuff that was shown, but I just felt like the presentation as a whole, like last year, I remember one of the complaints was that it was so long. And this year I was pretty excited to see it was kind of cut back by, I think, nearly an hour from like that original runtime. Mm-hmm. But even with that delay in time frame, like we actually watched it together with a couple of your friends, and we were just kind of, I feel like there was way too many opportunities where we were kind of disengaged and just kind of chatting and like, just the kind of extended looks at things that seemed to go on for way too long. Or there was a lot of like on stage talking. And I love it when you get to hear from the devs and you get to see, what the thought process was and they can explain the game. But I feel like on this kind of stage with this kind of magnitude, like Jeff was selling, there was tickets to like IMAX theaters to go and watch this presentation in the States. And like, E3 doesn't exist. And this is like the first season where that isn't a thing. So you would expect like, okay, we got to go all out, make this the greatest showcase we can possibly do, and really solidify like Summer Games Fest is taken over now as like the main thing. And it just was, there was too much downtime and like kind of those C+ tier kind of games that were there for way too long. And it was it could have been way better. It could have been way better.
I agree, and I think it's not necessarily like Jeff's fault. I like Jeff as a host. I think he's a ton of fun. Like, I will never not like. Every now and again, I just watch the Elden Ring reveal from last year, just because like partially it was so hype for me, but partially like just to see how excited Jeff was about it. Like, it's finally here. He's like so hype. It's the most wholesome, like infectious thing. But like, I just think that there's not a hell of a lot of stuff right now to show, and it sucks that like this kind of thing has to happen regardless, because like it's like COVID delays and shit, right? Like last year was such a massive boom because it was everything that's supposed to be in 2020 and got delayed to 2021, and there was just like so much shit. And then I think like we haven't really like caught up from like the new stuff because everyone's like was finishing up COVID delay stuff, and like we're still on the back end of like those things coming out of delays, and like not a hell of a lot of new projects being greenlit or being like far enough along to show off satisfactorily. And so I think it's just an unfortunate time that like 2021 was amazing for games and 2022 kind of has to like suffer a little bit is the side effect of that.
Yeah, I wonder. See, there's like two ways this could go, though, right? Like, there's so many companies that usually are doing presentations that are not. Like, Ubisoft has nothing announced. Sony did the state of play, but it's like it was before. Xbox obviously has their own thing, but there was also like there's no EA showcase this year or anything. So it really would have made a lot of sense for like, you know, if things are pushed back and whatnot, you know, that makes a lot of sense. Maybe that's why those companies haven't announced something. But at the same time, like, especially those two huge publishers, like, or like Square as well, like, you got to think they'd have at least one game that could go in summer Game Fest or something, you know? Like, I was surprised not to see anything from EA or Ubisoft in general. And those are two big companies that could have really brought something maybe in the middle of Jeff's showcase that could have been like, you know, a bigger, cool announcement than some of the stuff that we got.
Yeah.
But yeah, I guess they, for whatever reason, I mean, it's not Jeff's fault. There's nothing to show, but it's unfortunate that he was almost like forced to do a showcase in a way too, because if E3 is taking this summer off, and it's like, if Jeff took the summer off too, that's his chance to kind of take over officially, right? So he's kind of stuck doing something no matter what he had to show. And then this is what we got. So I guess without further ado, let's get into it. We started off the show. Street Fighter 6, more stuff. Right. We saw this before the PlayStation show, but I mean, not a Street Fighter person, as we know, but the art of this game is super cool, and I love that they're doing the kind of Smash style controls.
Yeah, exactly. Like, this is the other thing too, where it's like this like would have been a really like hype way to start it out, but it's like, well, we saw it 2 days prior at PlayStation, so that's a shame. But
yeah, exactly.
Street Fighter is hype. It looks good. Guile's confirmed as like a long-standing like fucking great character. So I mean, yeah, it looks good, but I mean, you're gonna ahead of time if you're buying Street Fighter 6 or not. Like, this trailer is not telling you if you're gonna buy it or not. You're either Street Fighter or no.
It's eye candy for those that want to see more. Before it comes out. So, and speaking of things that we had already seen at the PlayStation showcase, we also right afterwards saw Callisto Protocol. Although this time there was something a little new. We saw a gameplay sort of section there, and man, there was some really amazing gore that happened in that trailer, like the character getting sucked into that fan at the end. Like, holy shit, that was really intense. And like stomping people, the zombies and all that. This game just looks like a great time. I'm really excited to play Callisto.
So this to me is still like the hypest thing that's been shown off in the last few days. I'm so stoked that we actually got some gameplay, as it wasn't just like another trailer of the same thing. It looks fucking good. I am so excited to play Dead Space remake and then also play this and see like and to compare them. But like, it genuinely looks so good and stressful, and like, oh my god, I can just imagine in the moment you're like, I gotta shoot that guy's kneecaps. It's like, it's hard to shoot a kneecap when you're stressed. Like,
it is, yeah. Shit. Totally. Yeah, no, I think this looks fantastic, and I love the way that it pays. So it's not just the gameplay and the atmosphere that really harkens back to Dead Space. It's also the fact that your health is still on like your character's neck and like the ammo for your gun. Like, those are some of the things that made Dead Space so iconic, and I think Callisto just seems to be like another take on something that's a really cool idea. Just looks great. I'm excited to play that. So I think something we've noticed that there's a lot of stuff that we're maybe not super super stoked on in this one, so we're going to go through some of these kind of quick. Stormgate, I feel like might be one of those. I don't know how you're feeling about Stormgate, but I don't have
Yeah,
a hell of a lot to
it's
say about it other than
it's
it's
Blizzard
there.
RTS. So I guess like they're not, part of my knowledge, there's not tons of RTS that come out these days. So maybe hype to get a new one.
Yeah,
But
it was
yeah.
that it had like that Balrog art and whatnot, and we were kind of like it was kind of just generic. I remember us thinking of like the art
All
style.
really generic. I didn't. You know what's funny is I didn't realize it was Blizzard at the time.
Well, it's X
That
Blizzard,
we were
X Blizzard. It's Frost
right,
Giant.
ex
Yeah.
Blizzard. Right, it's Frost Giant. It's ex Blizzard people. But we were making the joke. We're like, oh look, it's Diablo. And then we made the joke during this trailer that we're like, oh, is this a new HOTS like trailer? We were laughing like, can we get a new HOTS character, please? So it's funny that it does end up being Blizzard because it's kind of that like generic sort of like, you know, like space marines and demons and like very like kind of like traditional tropey sort of
Mm-hmm.
art styles, I suppose. And
Right.
so that's very much what Stormgate felt like to me.
Well, I know how much you like Space Marines and going around spaceships and that kind of sci-fi. So, what did you think of Aliens: Dark Descent that was shown next?
You know what?
It looks cooler than
Um,
Stormgate, I'll say.
it looks cool in Stormgate. So this is pretty cool. I thought it was like a Alien Isolation sequel, which would have been pretty hype because that was a good horror game. But instead, it's like a squad-based like action game,
Yeah, it's funny. I
which
thought it was
makes
like a
me less.
turn-based thing at the start, but yeah, I think it's like a twin stick kind of action game, right?
Yeah, so I just I, I think like apathy is a lot of my response to these games, which is kind of the worst thing
Mm-hmm.
to have. But I just it looks okay. Like I'm gonna forget it exists and probably never see it again.
Yeah, they're releasing a lot of Alien stuff the last couple of years. I've
I
really noticed
they
that.
are. I will say though that like the alien creature design is one of the coolest monster designs. Like the xenomorphs are incredibly cool.
Yeah, they
So
are.
I see why they studios keep wanting to pull that.
Yeah, and you know what I was hoping? I really thought this was going to be the DLC that they'd promised for Fireteam Elite that I played last year,
Yeah.
the co-op game, because I would have been really excited to see that co-op. That game was a ton of fun, and I'm like actively anticipating that DLC for a reason to go back and have more to do in that game. But I played that game because it was fun, not because it was aliens. So this is probably not the one for me. And speaking of not the one for me, next up we had Call of Duty Modern Warfare 2, a game which I have immense nostalgia for. I mean, it came out in like the prime of the end of my high school days, and like all my friends would be online playing all the time. Some really cool campaign missions. It was really actually kind of nostalgic to go and see that mission on the boat with like all the rain and the crates sliding around. Like there's some really cool tech behind all that stuff. But then you get into like I just can't get excited about these military shooters anymore, and they're trying to pump up all these characters of like, oh, you remember Soap and Gaz and McTavish and all these guys, and I'm like, look, I played like probably 200 hours of this game back then, and I remember McTavish because he had a Scottish accent. I remember Soap because his name's weird and that's the guy you play as, and I can't tell you who the fuck any of those other people are. Like I don't play Call of Duty for the characters, like yeah, so that's how I feel about that.
Yeah, this was I think one of the ones that was like, wow, it was a long look
Hmm.
at this. Like it's cool there was gameplay, which we're kind of harped on not having enough of, so that's awesome. But I think it's one of those things where there's been like a massive surge of like remasters and remakes lately, which we've talked about on the show before, and we both agree is an awesome thing because it's so cool to be able to go back to one of your beloved games in a new, more modern way. And then it's also amazing for people who missed it the first time around, and they get to like have a more convenient way to experience these games. So like I'm all on board for remasters or remakes. I think it's great we're getting them, but they're not the most exciting thing for this kind of presentation because it's familiar, right? Like a lot of what's cool about these is like going into it blind and being like, what are they going to show? Like what's a cool new exciting thing I can like get excited about? And like if you're a really big Call of Duty fan, this might be it. But like it's okay, it's Call of Duty again, is the joke, but like really it's Call of Duty again because it's the same game.
Right, yeah, yeah. I think the other thing that's kind of weird too, and it's kind of like a tonal difference thing, is like last year there was all this, there was, a lot of political turmoil going on, and Jeff had made a statement at the start of the show. A lot of people have been talking about like, will he say something or not? And he made a statement about like, war and they didn't want to show a lot of Call of Duty or something like that. And then this time he comes around and there's like no mention of it. Here's Call of Duty back. Like we're just gonna forget about all of these like social political issues and just sweep it under the rug for next time. So it was a little disappointing. Nothing was acknowledged there, but not to get stuck on that kind of thing. Just something to mention. Next we had Flashback 2. This is a remake of Amiga game, which I mean I don't think either of us have ever heard of this, so I don't think we have anything to say. After that, Fort Solis. This is when Troy Baker came on the stage. And this game, I mean, I found it kind of difficult to know exactly what this was, to be honest.
Yeah, it is a apparently it's an action-heavy first-person shooter.
Right.
With Troy Baker and Arthur Morgan's Roger Clark. So.
Yeah, right. I mean, what is it really like? Is it going to be, is it story? Is it not? I don't know, but it's another thing in space. And we have a lot of space.
You have a lot of space. Strap in if you're into space.
Yeah. I feel like this is the kind of thing where it's like, is anyone really going to play this over Dead Space or Callisto Protocol or one of the other sci-fi games? I mean, I guess probably because people love Troy Baker and people love, yeah.
And I think like the horror element is like a big thing for Dead Space, whereas this is maybe more of a I don't know. It is a tight thriller, so
yeah.
Maybe
it does. You know, like it kind of. That's what I mean. It's kind of this one vibe going on.
But it was again just another cinematic trailer, and it's like, well, I have no idea what this game's gonna be, and so.
Yeah, and that's the theme. That's the theme, like you said. Just
maybe
all
we'll see another thing about it in a year.
All cinematic trailers.
Yeah.
So next up we had Outriders Worldslayer. I think you guys were a little excited about Outriders, just on the premise. I think it's the kind of thing where it's like it would be fun. But you have Destiny. You have Borderlands.
That's the problem. Is like this game genuinely looks kind of cool, but it's like it looks so much like Destiny to me. Like a lot of the outfits and the character designs, and I mean, like it looks cool, but like you can only have so much time for these kind of.
It's hard to get invested
like,
in
online games, right?
I know what you mean, but yeah, it did legitimately look pretty cool though. Like I could see a lot of people being excited to try that one out. Speaking of excited to try it out, this is one I feel like actually really did get you excited. Witchfire was up next. This is like the first person sort of medieval pistol magic game that looked like really intense combat wise. What did you think?
So there's chain lightning is my first initial point. This game looked cool. It looks fun. It looks very power fantasy. Like I like the setting. I like the visuals. I think it's one of those games where if it feels good to play, it could be a good time. But it's hard to tell based on one of these trailers like how satisfying and responsive like actually using those big magic spells is going to be.
Yeah, and the interesting thing about the game too is like I'm just actually reading this now, but there's no cutscenes. It's literally just like I guess levels and you're going through the actions. So that might be kind of nice in the sense that sometimes you just want to play something a bit lighter and not get caught down in a big story or something like that. So I think it's one to keep track of. But to me, like Witchfire, I mean, it just looks like I'd rather play Metal Hellsinger because that game looks so good, and I can't wait for it. We'll talk about that. We'll talk about that. First, we'll talk about Routine though, which was the next game shown, and apparently this game had been shown over a decade ago, which is something I did not realize at all. But it's another sci-fi kind of going around. It looks kind of interesting.
Horror vibe to it.
Yeah, I think this one looks more interesting to me. Like there's that robot at one point where, and I like the design of it. I don't really know what else to say though because it's just again I don't get a good clear idea of exactly what this is.
Yeah, exactly. And a lot of them kind of merged in my mind too, where it's like, oh, they're kind of similar vibes and similar kind of settings, and it's like nothing's really like distinct necessarily about them. But I agree, the robot had a cool design in this one, and it's another kind of maybe adjacent horror game. And so like I'm never upset to have more of those because every now and again, like my friend group, we just pull out a horror game and like having something half decent, or like newer that isn't just Resident Evil over and over again is nice.
Yeah, sure. I think this one actually, I'm just watching the trailer now to refresh my memory on it. I think in comparison to the one that we just talked about with Troy Baker, this is a lot more exciting to me. I like the atmosphere of it a lot more, and I like the fact that it doesn't seem to be as focused on combat, and so those to me are
Mm-hmm.
typically more scary when you have less ability to deal with the things that are coming for you.
Yeah, I
And so
agree.
yeah,
This generally looks pretty decent. You got like that scanner you're using, which
yeah,
like is always a bad sign because that just is tension magnified.
yeah, yeah,
So
exactly. So after that, we saw that Fall Guys Season 1 was coming. I don't think we have a lot to say about that. I know there's some Sonic skins coming there, so go get them, Sonic fans. Enjoy that. After that, we saw Highwater, which I think I was pretty excited for at the time. It's another one of these sort of like lake type of games where it seems slower paced. You're kind of going around a town, nice visuals, getting to kind of talk to people and see what their deal is and kind of uncover the mystery of the place that you're in. Non-combat, narrative focused. It looks interesting. To me, this is the kind of thing where similar to Lake, like if I have a convenient opportunity to play it and it's either on a good sale or Game Pass or something like that, I could definitely see myself being drawn to this just because of the art style, if nothing else, and the premise.
yeah, I agree. It's like one of those nice indie games. And the weird thing about this game to me is like it was kind of the only one.
Mm-hmm.
And like normally with these kind of showcases, like they're peppered throughout because there's lots of indie games coming out. So it kind of stuck out to me as like strange that there wasn't more games like this in the presentation, but it looks cool. Apparently, like reading about it afterwards, it's focused around like the issues of climate change.
Mm-hmm.
And so you're kind of like riding around on your little boat and going through this town that's like a mix of nature but also like a bigger city. And so I think it sounds like a good premise. I'm into it and I agree it's one of those like, it goes on the list of all those indie games to play and you have a convenient way to play it.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Um, and speaking of those type of games too, this one coming up next, American Arcadia. I've looked into this a little bit more since we've watched the showcase, and I think this actually might be one of my more hyped announcements of the show. The premise is kind of it's along the lines of one of those Black Mirror episodes where you're kind of it's kind of a dystopian situation you're in. I think it's set kind of in a 70s sort of retro future type of vibe, and you're
Mhm.
the everyone in the city is like being surveilled, and you can like lose your social standing by doing certain things, and it's really just reminding me of that sort of episode of Black Mirror and the way that it's like these are things we deal with in real life, like where people's okay with surveillance and like all this kind of data tracking and all this stuff. So to kind of zoom that back to the 70s and have a different take on it, I'm really excited to see like what the narrative is with this game, and I think it could be something really cool.
Yeah, I think there's games where I like it in concept, but I just don't think it looks that fun to play is
Mm-hmm.
the problem. Like it's a cool idea and I like the world and I like the setting and the like the commentary, but I just think it's like I don't want to play that for 10 hours, Like I want to
Sure.
watch the trailer, be happy that it exists, think like, oh, that's neat, and then I'm good.
Sure.
Like I don't know how much more I get out of that
Yeah,
than
and to be fair, I mean, I don't like the art style at first. I think I said to you, I thought it was that like
yeah.
that ridiculous like park builder game that we saw
It
a few
does
times
look like
ago,
that.
and like that
Yeah.
art style, like it really doesn't do a lot for me. But I think a lot of times that art style kind of goes with that like silly internet humor type of like, oh, it's so
Mhm.
ridiculous, and because this isn't that. I think I'm more forgiving on the art style, and even if it doesn't have a lot of like gameplay mechanics and whatnot, like I'm completely happy to sacrifice that kind of thing in a lot of games if it has an interesting narrative hook and like something to say about like an analog to like our real life society and stuff. Like I really eat that stuff up. So for me,
Mm.
it's pretty exciting.
Yeah.
After that, speaking of things that are not exciting, Goat Simulator 3.
Or
I
speaking of that internet humor.
yeah,
Yeah, here
I
we
think
go.
there's probably not a game I could care about less than Goat Simulator. I just don't
Yeah.
care at all. It's
I
it's that
I
aimless kind of
agree.
random humor, and none of it does it for me. But you know what? A lot of people friggin' love Goat Simulator, so good for those people. Glad you enjoy it. Midnight Suns was next, and as disappointing as it was not to get gameplay again for another thing, it was cool to see it. I loved seeing the design of the Hulk and like Scarlet Witch as some of the villains, and I mean we got another sick Metallica remaster of
We
Master of
did.
Puppets. So I mean I can't be too upset about this one.
Yeah, no, this is hype as fuck. Like XCOM has always been a game I've been wanting to get into because it's like such a pinnacle in tactics, and I just can't do it. Like the setting just puts me off, and like every time I've tried, I've just quickly fallen off. So to have it Marvel skinned instead is so much more appealing to me. And I genuinely think like this game is going high up my list. Like apparently it says here, I don't know if I remember seeing this during the trailer, but in the games radar form we're going through to look back on it says the release date is October 7th,
Yeah, I think
which
so. I think they said at the end.
yeah, which they might have, but like it genuinely looks pretty hype. Like I would be interested to pick this up for sure.
Yeah, and it's one of those too, like I think Fire Access has enough of a reputation for this genre of game where even though we haven't seen gameplay, I still would be willing to give it a shot. And especially the other thing too is I kind of respect them for not putting gameplay for this game. And I don't think it would have been as big of a deal, um, if there had been more games that did have gameplay, just because I feel like, tactics and those type of games don't always show really well on a trailer. Like imagine, we're complaining not having gameplay, but if they'd shown like 5 minutes of tactics RPG gameplay, we would be like, well, that was really slow paced and not so fun to watch. So they're kind of damned
Yeah,
either way.
that's totally fair. I think it's less like I want to see an extensive look at gameplay and just more I want to see like what kind of quirks there are to it, because like it's going to be grid based and you're moving your characters around and then they have abilities to use, and like
Well, I know it's got
that's
cards
just a
too.
given.
It's got
But yeah,
cards as
exactly.
well.
There's a card system. There's supposed to be like kind of light social sim system where like Doctor Strange and like the Hulk can hang out after you do a mission, and like kind of seeing like a little bit of those extra
Yeah.
nuance things on top of what you can just assume is going to be the basis of like turn-based tactics might have been nice. But I agree, it's Metallica, it's cool, the aesthetic's awesome, it's Marvel. It's finally getting to enjoy an XCOM game. So
Yeah, yeah.
I'm on board. My only complaint is I wish it was coming to Switch, and
Mm-hmm.
maybe it will in the
Mm-hmm.
future, but right now it's set up for PS4, 5, all the Xboxes and PC. And I
Yeah.
think this is the kind of game I would love to just like take on the go because it's that slower paced tactics style, but
Yeah, it would be
so be
awesome.
it.
It would be awesome. But I mean, maybe it's just the kind of thing where like, hey, the Switch just isn't enough to run this. I mean, it looks to be,
Mhm.
I mean, we haven't seen gameplay, I guess, but the high quality visuals going on, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, we'll see. And speaking of high quality visuals, the next thing
Oh,
we had Cuphead Delicious Last Course. Of course, we both played and loved Cuphead. I'm buying this day one for sure. There's no doubt about it in my mind. I am so excited to play more Cuphead. I'm excited to, new character. I forget her name, but I mean, she looks pretty cool.
like
Not that the character
Chalice face. I
Chalice,
can't.
Lady Chalice or something.
Lady Chalice
Chalice
face.
face.
That's not right.
Chalice face.
Not right. I kind of what she looks like.
Yeah.
I think she's a teacup.
Oh, I think she's a
Actually.
teacup. Yeah, yeah. Either way, I
Yeah.
mean, what more can you say? It's just more outstanding Cuphead style art. The bosses. I mean, the gameplay they showed, that boss looks like a hell of a lot of fun. He looks like a total bastard. But I mean, I just can't wait.
What a fucking asshole that boss
Yeah,
is.
I just can't wait.
You know what? This is super excited. I am actually like hype. I gotta go finish Cuphead because I haven't. So I gotta
Yeah,
get
you
my
should.
controller to like calm down a little bit and finish Cuphead.
Right. So Neon White, this is a game which I'm pretty interested in myself. I've been kind of watching it since it was announced. I think it was last year. But this is the one that's kind of like that speed running sort of first person parkour game, but there's also a card system involved in it as well. And it's Annapurna as well, and I've had a lot of success with Annapurna stuff in the past. I think generally the stuff that they put out is stuff that I really like, and so Neon White, it's on the radar. I think it's what does it say about me that this is one of the games I'm more excited for from this showcase as a whole? I don't know, because it is a smaller thing, but it looks good to me, and I'll play it at some point for sure.
Yeah, I agree. It's one of those games like I almost want to like it more, but like it almost looks. I'm concerned it might be too hectic for me. Like it's just a little too fast paced, speedrunny, and I tend to play a little slower. But it does generally look cool. The card system looks whack, and like it's coming out in like a week. So
Yeah, it's very soon, very soon. So I'm gonna have to get you to talk about Midnight Fight Express, because I gotta tell you, I must have like passed out for 20 minutes because I don't remember seeing this game at all when I was watching the showcase. Do you remember this?
yeah, I mean after rewatching it this morning, I do. It's just like a beat 'em up. They say it's a mashup of Hotline Miami and Gang Beasts.
Okay.
So it's
Yeah.
a like isometric action kind of thing, and I think there's like guns, and then you can do like hand-to-hand combat and like kick chairs around and stuff. And like to me, it looks like the kind of thing that is like maybe would be fun couch co-op or like hard to get like super invested in. But the interesting thing about it is that this is the game that was the story is penned by the co-writer of Destiny 2's Witch Queen.
Oh
and
yeah.
and the animations were built with the involvement of the stuntman of God of War.
Oh yeah. Okay, I remember that now because
Exactly.
I remember that.
Which is like it's kind of weird flexes, but at the same time, like this is not at all like looking at the gameplay, it looks like a silly, like kind of like not super serious action beat 'em up kind of game. So to have like a big writer come in from Destiny and which is like a very story driven expansion and like Witch Cream was extremely well received. So that's unexpected because like I would have just expected there to be literally no story, let alone like
Yeah.
something
Right.
that they want to out a bit. And then like the God of War stuntman is probably good as fuck because that game has amazingly choreographed action, but it's like I don't know, it just kind of hit you like out of nowhere.
Well,
In the
it's
trailer.
like a weird flex. I don't think I've ever seen
Yeah.
anything advertised like movie, game, TV show. I don't think I've ever seen something advertised of like who the stuntman is. That's a brand
But,
new thing.
thinking about it, that should be a bigger advertisement because like the stuntmen are like incredibly important. Like you watch any action movie, especially, and it's like the stuntman's on screen as much as the actual actor is, and
Potentially
like
more on some
potentially
movies.
more. And like they're not getting paid the same as the actor, and they're getting hurt, and like it's insane. Like they should be they should be higher up on the like billing and like getting their names out there. And it's like, oh, like we should be able to recognize like, oh, cool, that stuntman's in it. Like he's awesome. He was a stuntman for like these other movies, and the action was great, and like that should be a selling point. So it's cool that they've got that announced here, and like God of War is a great title to have on there. But also it's like I think it's like the juxtaposition between those two names and like this game just looking kind of like a silly generic beat 'em up
Hell yeah,
instead of
Kate.
something a
Tell
bit
him.
more like
Tell him.
I don't know.
Tell him about it.
I don't
Okay.
know.
All right. So after that, we're gonna skip over the Warframe announcement. I mean,
There's Warframe.
Warframe was there. People love Warframe. Enjoy your Twitch streams, everybody. And let's talk about Honkai Star Rail because I love the name Honkai Star Rail, first of all.
Okay.
This game was that anime game. I thought for sure that it was, well, for a very split second, I was like, oh my god, Persona. But clearly it wasn't Persona.
It was Honkai.
I don't know exactly what this is going to be like or if it's going to be good because you can't always judge the quality of like these anime games. You know, sometimes they're like, they end up being like really, really amazing. And other times it's just kind of like they fall into the ether and never are spoken about again. But I mean, I'm into it. I think it looks cool. I'd like to see more of it. I think this also was like, didn't they say this was kind of inspired by like a Persona type day-night system, or am I thinking of something else?
I don't know.
Could
We
be thinking
talked
of
about
something
Persona
else.
a lot.
We did.
I do know that it's also set in space.
It is. It is.
And that there's a massive space train. So
Space train.
you know,
Yeah.
that's a thing.
So I mean, it's called Honkai Star Rail. So the
Right,
rail
yeah,
must be
that's
the
the thing.
train.
That must be the Star Rail.
Yes, yes. Okay, well, I think part of the reason we're confused as well is because the very next game we saw, Zenless Zone Zero, Zenless Zone Zero, was another anime kind of game with another cool art style. I mean, gotta give it to that.
This was a little more cyberpunk.
A little more
I would
cyberpunk,
just
a little more
imagine.
action combat. Looks cool as well though. Like it kind of gives me like, you know, Devil May Cry is a good example, but I wonder exactly what how story focused it's going to be, or is it just more of like a hack and slash type of thing? Character looks cool though. I love these characters when they have like the visor over their eyes, like in what's that other game people really love, Nier Automata or whatever.
Nier
Like
Automata,
there's all these
sure.
characters, all these anime
Blindfold.
characters always have blindfolds, and somehow they can still beat the shit out of everybody, and it's just so cool.
Imagine if they didn't have the blindfolds. Like, oh man.
Yeah, man, how effective would they be then if they could see?
Well, speaking of people that have got, or I guess creatures that have got shit over their eyes.
Yes. Let's
The
talk
next
about
game.
Ninja Turtles.
Potentially the hypest thing. We got a release date June 16th, which is just wow. That
Yeah.
is basically now, and that's exciting.
Yeah, I couldn't be more excited for this. And I mean, I've talked about it before, but ever since playing Streets of Rage 4 last year, knowing this is from Dotemu, or at least publishing by the same company, I mean, I just couldn't be more excited. I love the graphics of this game. Like this style of like, you know, it's like an up-resed arcade kind of thing. It's just the way that it moves, and like the explosions of the pixel art, and the, you know, the kind of sprite based attack animations, they're all just beautiful. And the way that it all moves, and it's so bright, so flashy. Like all the characters of this, they're not like chibi characters, but they're like kind of that smaller sort of art style, almost like a Game Boy Advance kind of thing. But it just looks perfect. It's exactly what you'd want from a Ninja Turtles beat 'em up.
100%. And of course, we got the new player, like new Casey is going to be in the game, which is awesome. I mean, we're kind of laughing because it's like, oh, there's a new announcement for the game, and it's like, okay, it's going to be Casey. Like, who else would it possibly
Yeah,
be?
who else could it be?
But that's super exciting, and like 6-player local co-op is just hype as fuck. And so I think to no one's surprise, this will be a game we'll probably talk about on the show in the near future, because we are going to be getting the squad together and sitting down all on the same couch and playing the shit out of this game.
It'd be fun. The thing that surprises me, like 6-player co-op is just amazing, but they put 7 characters in the game, so someone's just gonna get tossed out. Imagine being the 7th character. You're like, okay, there's a 7-character roster, 6 players, and I'm the character that doesn't get picked. Like that must be a shitty feeling, Raphael.
Sorry, Michelangelo, but
sorry, Michelangelo.
It had to be someone.
Man, I don't get it. People love Michelangelo. Like, to me, he's easily my least favorite of any of those characters. But people love Michelangelo.
I agree.
I feel like I'm in the wrong boat on that one.
To be fair, I think if it came down to real life, I might hang out with Michelangelo over Raphael, because he's just kind of a dick. Is his character personality, but like he's cool, so it's hard to decide.
If we're talking about who we're gonna hang out with, that's a different question than who I think is cool to play as in a video game.
Exactly. And so I'm saying Michelangelo might win in that aspect, but otherwise, like, I'm not picking him in this game. I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, me either. So after that, we talked about Humankind for a little bit. This is another 4X game, you know, Civilization-esque for people that don't really know about 4X. And I'm one of them, because I've never played a game like this, even though they are like the kind of thing that takes over people's lives, to say the least. I think the trailer was pretty cool. Like, it had some live action parts with like a girl that kept, I guess, looking different depending like what civilization she was taking over during the game. Like, it was a cool presentation. I appreciated it for the difference of presentation that it brought to the showcase, but it's not something I'm going to play.
Yeah, I agree. I think it was a really cool trailer. Like, this is the kind of thing where, like, even though it's not my game, I'm excited to watch the trailer because it's just a good, like, representation of the game, and it's an exciting, well-made trailer. But agreed, like, 4X games, like, I don't have that kind of time in my life.
I know. I would like to try one day, though. Like, I am interested in it. I think it's just the kind of thing where, like, to play one, I legitimately want to sit down with someone that's played like 100 hours and they can tell me what to do.
That's the thing, is like there's just so much. Like, the first time you play, you're sitting in like the either the Wikipedia, or like often these games have like encyclopedias in games where you just sit and look stuff up, and like
and that's not fun.
There's kind of that barrier to entry, but they are a ton of fun when you get into them.
Yeah. So moving on, we had One Piece Odyssey next. One Piece, of course, as an anime, I've always thought like visually and like thematically very cool. Like pirates, kick ass, very cool characters. But, you know, never really got into the anime and all this stuff because it's like 2 billion episodes long and filler and all that stuff. But this game, what I thought was a beat 'em up and kind of, or like a fighting game, because these anime games are like always one of the two of those. But apparently this is like a Dragon Quest style RPG. Which makes me a lot more interested in seeing what the reviews end up being like, because it could be a cool way to get into some One Piece sort of lore if the RPG ends up being good.
Yeah, and I think it's been confirmed as well that the creator of One Piece like is also directly involved with the game, so it's supposed to be like pretty, like, I think it's like a separate story from the manga and the show, but it's like gonna be authentic in the way that like he was involved and like would have had some creative, like, just made some creative decisions for it. So that's pretty cool, and like it's nice to see these games get a little bit more of like I don't want to say like a serious reveal, but they just get something a little bit more than the generic, like they're often kind of skins of each other, of like the same beat 'em up stuff, and like, okay, this time you're playing as Naruto instead of like Luffy, and so it's kind of nice for it to get like a little bit more of a like legit game. because like
Mm-hmm.
it's so big and so many people love these things. So
Yeah, that's a good point. That's a good point. Yeah, but it's what I'd like, casually keep my eye on it for sure for what that ends up being. A similar opinion too for me for Soul Hackers 2, a game which I'd never really heard of, but after doing some research on what is Soul Hackers, it's actually another spin-off of Shin Megami Tensei, which is the same as
interesting.
Persona, and so I don't obviously think it's those are all a little bit different, but it's derived from the same sort of base premise. And so this trailer doesn't really tell you a lot about like the gameplay or what exactly the game ends up being, but just kind of figuring that out and realizing it's from Atlas, it's a Shin Megami offshoot just like Persona is. It's got me wanting to learn more about the game for sure, because it's got the workings of something that could be cool.
Yeah, it could be cool, but I think that's another one of those trailers where it was like not even a minute long,
Mm-hmm.
and there's just some like anime visuals, and it's literally like this game could be a rhythm game, it could be like an RPG, it could be a beat 'em. I have literally no idea what's going on, and like
Mm-hmm.
it's probably hype if you know what Soul Hackers is, but otherwise it's like
Yeah.
this means literally nothing to
Oh,
me.
I know, and that's why I'm glad I googled it just a little while ago, because
Mhm.
I would have just passed it over, right? But
Yeah.
it's reason to investigate, I guess. Knowing that now. So we had Capcom Arcade Second Stadium, which is going to be a bunch of Capcom um, retro titles.
Classic.
Kind of cool for those that are interested, but I think that's not really our jam. But speaking of jams, Metal Hellsinger was up next. Serge Tankian making an appearance. Well, I guess he wasn't actually in the trailer, but he was. His voice was with the music, and
Mhm.
man, like this is like the rhythm. I mean, we've talked about this on the show enough times, but this is definitely something that looks. I mean, even if the gameplay isn't that fun, I'm still just down to listen to this music. Like it's gonna be awesome.
Hyped. There's a demo out for this game now, which I haven't played, but 100% I will be playing, and it is going to come up on the next episode of our regular show because I'm playing this demo. I'm hype as fuck. This game's coming out on September 15th and genuinely might just be a day one purchase for me. Like
Hmm.
so many of my favorite bands, like yeah, Surge is in there. We've got Lamb of God. We've got Jin, like the singer from
Yeah,
Ginger
yeah,
is in here. Like
yeah.
Spoilwork, like some of my very very favorite bands.
Trivium.
And then Trivium, like they just got such a ridiculously all star like star studded cast here. And then it's Doom, which I've always kind of been interested in playing, but then with this like rhythm based music based spin on it, like it is so incredibly creative, but at the same time like makes me shocked no one's ever done it before, because those games like you do feel like you get into such a powerful rhythm playing them, and like you kind of like create your own little beat, so to play it actually to music, like
Hmm.
I'm
Hmm.
so happy with how creative and fun this is, and like yeah, September 15th, like I think it's very very likely I just kind of impulse I'm buying this
Yeah.
day one and
Well,
let's
I mean, I
go.
don't think it's an impulse at this point. We've seen this game for the better part of a year, and we've done nothing but praise it
True.
the whole time because
True.
it just looks great, and I'm right there with you. I couldn't be more excited to play it. I mean, I could be more excited if they announced like some more killer bands to join the thing. But I mean, the soundtrack is already like, what more could you realistically ask for from a game sort of of this size, with like they have heavy hitters from like the metal genre of music, right? Like this is amazing. Couldn't have seen enough, I guess. September 15th, pretty close.
Hmm.
So next we had Nightingale, which I think immediately killed the hype from Metal Hellsinger, because this is something that we have some different game opinions sometimes, but one thing we can both agree on is I just think neither of us really could care less about those kind of survival sort of base building type of setups. And this one, to be fair, I do want to give it some credit because it has sort of like a card system, or like an element of using a deck of some kind that we saw. It wasn't really clear what it was for, but at least that was something kind of unique. But I don't know, like I'm just not interested in the base building stuff. I'm not interested in the medieval high fantasy as much as other people. Like this just is so flat for me as like what I'm looking for.
Think like I wish this was just a different game because I like the world so much, and like they have these portals and the tagline says like foul things lurk in the interrealmic void. It kind of sounds funny, but at the same time it's like, oh, getting like some kind of like creepy, like almost like Lovecraftian kind of monsters is sort of the vibe I'm getting, and like that is 100% my aesthetic. but I just could not be bothered to build a base. Like, I would rather clean my in real life house than like manage a base in a video game. Like, I just don't care. And I'm just like, I'm so glad that trend of everything's secretly secondary a base builder is kind of coming to an end. But like, you know, there's a few stragglers, and unfortunately,
You
Nightingale is
stragglers.
one of them.
Yeah, you're right though. The world does look cool, like going through that
Yeah.
swamp kind of area, and like some of the color palette is really nice. It's
Mm-hmm.
it's you know, got that kind of smoky, foggy kind of look in a lot of places. But you're right. If it didn't have the base building, I would instantly be like, "Whoa, this is interesting now." Like, I
Mm-hmm.
just can't be bothered to go collect 7 sticks to build myself a fireplace, you know, or whatever it ends up being.
Mm-hmm.
So next we completely changed the vibe. We saw Saints Row again. Looks like more Saints Row, honestly. It's I was hoping it would stay a little bit more grounded because I historically really liked Saints Row 2 and 3. Of course 3 was pretty ridiculous as well, but 2 was like somewhat grounded, you know. And by the time you got to 4, it was like you were a superhero, you were flying, you no longer needed cars because you could just jump like 20 miles at a time. And this one again, from what we're seeing in this trailer, seems to be leaning more into some of that zaniness, not like the superpowers, but you know, neon lights and all this weird stuff. And so I think I'm a little bit cooler on it than I was originally, because I would love to go back to that kind of Saints Row 2 sort of vibe myself. But yeah, it's going to be interesting to watch how this one is received, I think, from afar.
I think like this like over the top outrageous is really not my aesthetic. Like, I think the tagline to this game is like, you know, be the swaggiest possible, I think is like the phrasing they use. And we're watching it and I was like, oh man, that's my life motto. And, and like my one of my best friends, like probably one of the people that knows me the best, he just like didn't even like make a joke of it. He just kind of quietly was like, no, it's not. Like, he's like, you're not good at that. Like, just kind of had a laugh. Like, it's just so the opposite of my aesthetic a lot of the time. And like, it's like a cool franchise. I love that Saints Row exists, and I love that it's kind of its own thing now and not just like a GTA clone.
Hmm.
But like, you know, the over the top, ridiculous, swaggiest life just is not the life I'm living.
Sure, it's not. If you were forced to play one, would you rather play Saints Row or GTA?
Probably play GTA, I think.
Oh, okay. I would have thought you'd
I
go for
just
Saints Row, but interesting.
the thing about GTA is like I don't really care for the gameplay, and I'm put off by all the like, you know, drive around and get arrested and like, you know, that kind of shit. But I think like the actual storylines to just play those without doing any extra stuff do seem like they got some interesting social commentary and
Mm,
characters. So like that it appeals to me in that like very narrow aspect of the game.
that's fair.
And
That's
so
fair.
yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I just thought I'd ask. I think for me it'd be Saints Row, but I don't know.
Hmm.
So after that we had Layers of Fear, yet another horror game that was shown off. This is from Bloober Team. They're the ones that made the Medium, and I think that was a game people liked quite a bit. So this was again, yeah, another horror game. Looked pretty scary. Looked pretty scary. Where is this ranking for you in terms of your horror list?
I'm pretty into this. I mean, anything that's a horror game that looks like it's at least pretty decent is good, because a lot of horror games are just shit, and like, you know, they just assume that you'll play it for the jump scares regardless. So getting a decent looking horror game is exciting. I've not played. So we played like way back when. I think it was like, I must have been the 2016 game. We played the trailer for it and really enjoyed it. Like, it's creepy. You're in like the generic horror mansion. There was like an emphasis on paintings. I remember there being a lot of art.
Mm-hmm.
So like that's kind of an interesting twist, I guess.
Yeah.
So
And I just think the atmosphere looks really creepy in this one. Like it's
mhm.
not as you know, it's not sci-fi like the other ones we've seen a lot in this
Yeah,
trailer to the same extent. This is more just like, hey, you're in like a creepy ass fucking house, and like
yeah.
it's
This is the very classic like Victoria era mansion,
yeah,
creepy house. Like,
rats on the
you know,
ground, wheelchair that
rats on the
moves for no
ground.
reason.
Exactly. Like, you walk down a hallway, the door at the end is locked. You turn around, now the hallway's like looks a bit different than it did the first time, and you're like,
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
tension, like
Yeah,
no weapons kind of thing. And yeah, it's
yeah.
like you
Again, the
just
no
can't
weapons
really go
thing,
wrong.
big bonus,
Yeah,
big bonus.
agreed.
Game with lots of weapons though. Gotham Knights was shown next. We got to see some gameplay, which was nice. We got to see Robin getting in some action there. I like I mean, I'm not a huge DC person. I don't know a lot of the lore around these characters. But what I really appreciate about it is that even though it's kind of dark and set at night and has that kind of like, you know, Gotham
Grungy kind of
vibe, is like that vibe, but it also does a lot to like still characterize the character designs. Like they all have those kind of neon colors on them, and their logos are all very distinct. Like I feel like even though it's dark and these characters are all fighting at night, like the characters actually look cool. And I think they're, from at least how I know the characters, they're doing them justice in a way that is interesting, and it's not like, you know, like the Avengers game. People had a lot of like, oh, I don't like that design for Thor, like those characters look weird. My read as someone who's like very casual is like, I like the way the characters look in this. I just question if it's the kind of gameplay that I would be interested in.
Yeah, I agree. I think this is one of those games where like I'd have fun if I played it, but it's never gonna make it to the high top of my list that I will actually play it. Just because they're just by virtue of other games existing, not a commentary on this game itself. But it looks cool. Like the combat's really cinematic, and I think if you're interested at all in like the DC universe, this is probably going to be a really good game.
Yeah, definitely. And I think this has a lot of like, if you're interested in DC universe, I think this is actually going to be pretty exciting. Like the story is, I guess, like Batman is dead, right, is what they've said, and
Yeah,
kind
so
of like that's pretty cool. You know, like if they came out with a Marvel game and it's like, you know, Wolverine is dead, like here's a bunch of X-Men trying to go and see what happens. Like that's a cool premise to me. So yeah, go get them. Gotham Knights for those that are interested. We had Warhammer after that, 40k Darktide. I don't have much to say about this. I mean, mechs and whatnot. I don't know like anything about Warhammer potentially, but it was okay.
It's kind of cool. It looks kind of like Dishonored-y to me a little bit, in a weird way. But it's like a co-op FPS, but also like this decent like melee combat with like knives and like you know, like big hammers and shit, and like it's just kind of that like cool like sci-fi fantasy blend. It's like Gears of War meets Dishonored meets like, you know, Warhammer, because Warhammer is also literally fucking everything.
Sure, yeah, that's a good point. I'm interested that you you have more of a positive opinion on this than I do, because I think one thing that you really like is like that slow paced sort of one-on-one style combat, whereas this really looks like, hey, here comes like 60 enemies and like all that. So it's like the same as what's that game we saw earlier?
It's like Vermintide, the middle one. This game is like. But I think Vermintide is also Warhammer, and so it's bad again. I don't know. I'm probably pissing people off. My Warhammer knowledge is very, very limited.
Better than mine.
But I think this game looks like it would be cool. Like, because it's co-op, I think it looks cool. Like sitting down on a couch and just like being these cool power fantasy kind of characters and like busting through with your buddies appeals to me a hell of a lot more than a single player game that's got similar kind of combat. And like I think the creature designs are pretty cool for Warhammer. Like they've got a lot of really gross, like pulsating, like zombie / massive humanoid rats and stuff. And it's just gross and like kind of fun in the way that like you could see a big boss bursting through at the end, going like and then you gotta fight him. And so.
That's true. It's kind of like Left 4 Dead in a way like that. You know, like that's the kind of vibe I'd be expecting from that, just in like a Warhammer sort of skin.
This is the kind of game where like I'm not gonna buy it, but if a friend of mine gets it and wants to play some co-op, I'm 100% on board, and like I will super get into it for a couple days and like be the big hype man. Nice.
Well, speaking of the big hype man, this leads us to the end of the show, and you know, the last announcement we had here, which coincidentally for us as a PlayStation primarily focused show was a pretty big ending, because although they did not show it in the State of Play, which was a couple weeks ago, we got to see some more looks at some Last of Us stuff to close this one out. So Neil Druckmann came on stage and he had a hell of a lot to say to Jeff Keighley. He was on there for a long time, but they essentially revealed 3 things. First of which we'll talk about is they finally confirmed that there is a Last of Us multiplayer coming for PS5. A lot of people really loved Last of Us Factions back when that was a thing with the original, and they had just kind of like this one piece of concept art that they showed us for what this multiplayer will be, but they're saying that, like Neil said, it's as big as any of the single player games with its own cast, very unique way of delivering story. And to me, like, this seems just really exciting. Like it seems like a lot more than just like a deathmatch mode or like a survival kind of mode. Like it seems like the kind of thing where it's like, you know, is it going to be like Ghost of Tsushima Legends? Is it going to be its own kind of narrative campaign where you play it through with a couple people using those amazing mechanics from The Last of Us 2? Like, this is a really exciting announcement to me, especially since it seems to be bigger in scope than what may have been expected.
I really hope it's like a Legends thing. Like what they've said is that it will be as big as any single of the single player games and features its own cast of characters with a very unique way of delivering the story. So I'm really hoping it's less of like you said, yeah, just like an online pick up play matches and like a shooter kind of thing, and more of like a co-op kind of campaign is what like I would really adore to play in this universe.
Yeah, it would
But
be
either way,
great.
like it's funny because I feel like they brought this up and then skipped over it pretty quickly to talk about the other two Last of Us like announcements. And I think like this one, if anything, is the one I want to hear more about. So it's possible it was just a tease. They don't have a lot they wanted to say, so they didn't want to linger on it too long. But I have a lot of questions. This could be really cool. And man, I have to play Last of Us 2 is the biggest takeaway.
Oh, I think you're gonna have enough time to do it. I really think this must be pretty far out. Like there shouldn't be
Yeah,
a reason they wouldn't have shown us more than a
exactly.
piece of concept art if this was anywhere near coming out. Like, you
Yeah.
know, 2024, maybe, you know,
Hmm.
like I don't know. Like it seems like it's a ways off, but just knowing it's in development, knowing what I mean, there's a lot of questions what Naughty Dog's been working on aside from, I mean, The Last of Us 3, if they're doing a third one in the series, but I mean, would they go back to Uncharted? Would they do something like this? So it's cool to know this is confirmed, and now it can kind of, you know, stop being speculation and more like, or speculation about what they're doing, and now the speculation can become what this will look like. And it's just another thing to look forward to in like future presentations as well.
Hmm.
So the second thing that they talked about then was the Last of Us HBO TV show. So we got to see they pointed out for the first time we saw what Pedro Pascal and Bella Ramsey look like from the front as Joel and Ellie. So that was cool to see their faces still look the same. And I mean, what more can we really say? I'm personally very excited to watch this show. I mean, HBO seems to always put out good products. Neil, who is like one of the lead writers of the game series, obviously is involved with the show. He directed an episode, so I mean, obviously having that level of involvement is great. And I mean, the cast looks to be amazing as well. Like, I'm just really interested to see how this ends up telling the story of The Last of Us.
Absolutely. And they had Troy Baker and Ashley Johnson
Mm-hmm.
back on the stage. It's funny that Troy Baker showed up again. Clearly you just like waited backstage for an hour and it's like, oh, cue time again. But it was cool to see their involvement because like with especially with video games like and voice actors now, like they do so much mocap work that they're not just reading scripts, right? Like they are putting themselves into their performance, and the performance of that character is distinctly unique because of what choices that they make. And so I think that's something that's really interesting, that has really changed in terms of like what voice actors jobs are in the last few years, is that like they're not just voice actors, they are proper actors in my opinion, because they're going through the motions, they're doing the scenes, they're reading everything, they're doing the facial capture. Like it's a very involved process. So it was cool to see them come out and also say that they've been involved with the show as well, because like they are Joel and Ellie, like as far as I'm concerned, right? Like, or at
Mm-hmm.
least they're an important portion of them in addition to Neil Druckmann and the other writers of the game. So it's cool that they're kind of like imparting, like even if it's like a little like inflection, or if like one of them has a small little mannerism that they always played, so they can share that with Pedro Pascal and Bella
Mm-hmm.
Ramsey, and
Mm-hmm.
like those are things that they can kind of like collaborate on, which is super cool to see that it's just being taken so seriously. And
Yeah.
this being one of the new big Sony things, like I feel like there's so much potential for criticism to people like, oh, but it's not exactly like the game, and like that's not always a bad thing. But if you can get those little details, then that's something that people will be excited about. So
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's interesting you bring them up too. Like, I'm curious to see what, like, how big are their parts in this show, because they did announce that although they're not playing Joel and Ellie, they're still having a role in the show. Like, they're gonna play, they're gonna be more than just background kind of people that show up. They're gonna have dialogue lines, and be somewhat involved, right? So I wouldn't imagine they're going to be, part of the core cast. Maybe they'll just be in an episode or two or something like that. But it'll be interesting to see how they use those characters. I mean, their voices are just so iconic as Joel and Ellie. Like, will it be weird as people who have played the games to then see these characters in the show and have like Pedro Pascal's Joel talking to someone who sounds like actual Joel? That's going to be weird. But I'm interested in how they're going to do it. And obviously I think it's the kind of thing that'll be a really neat Easter egg for people like us. And then the rest of the HBO audience that's never interacted with The Last of Us may not, it's just a little sprinkle on top for people that.
Yeah, exactly. It's like when we watched the Uncharted movie and Nolan North is there for that one scene and it's super exciting. Like, oh, there he is. That's Nate.
Exactly. Yeah. I hope they have a little bit of a bigger part than he did, but I mean, who knows? And finally, then to ending off the entire showcase, was another Last of Us announcement, something that had been heavily rumored to the point where I think we pretty much all but knew it was happening. But this is the Last of Us Part 1 remake, which has been kind of up-resed, reskinned, like polished up with the new PS5 kind of visuals matching The Last of Us 2. And as well, they are going to, I think the action now performs with like the new Last of Us 2 mechanics as well. And so I'm curious of what you think about this remake, and if The Last of Us needed a remake, or kind of what your thoughts are on that.
So I think I'm in a good position to speak to that because I played The Last of Us for the first time like a year and a half ago. So it was sure it's like an older game, but it was remastered it came out in 2013, I believe.
Yeah, on PS3.
On PS3, it was remastered for PS4 in 2014. And aside from occasionally every now and again, it's like, oh, that was a little janky. I had to be standing exactly here to interact with this ladder or whatever. That felt like a little bit dated. The game did not feel dated in the slightest. Like, the combat was really responsive. The game is absolutely gorgeous still with the PS4 remaster. And so I really don't think that this game needs a remaster. Because like it already has a good one, and like, sure, I guess 2014 is a while ago now, but like it holds up like surprisingly well. Like, I don't think there was a time me and my friends sat down to play that one of us wasn't like, holy shit, this game still like looks good. And so like, I mean, it's cool that this exists, and I think it's really cool if you haven't played The Last of Us that this is just like the best possible version to play it on. But I also think that it's it's not really something anyone necessarily was asking for.
Yeah, it's really interesting, and to me it's like just so clear that this has been planned because of the TV show, and because they know they're going to be sucking in a whole new audience who would otherwise have not experienced The Last of Us because of the HBO show, and they want to have a brand new product to kind of put in front of their face and like advertise. And you like the TV show, well, here's the game. And it's been like being remade, like, or renamed Last of Us Part 1, where of course like the original was just called The Last of Us, but now it's kind of had that title change to match up with the second part. I don't know, like you said, I'm always excited for like these remakes and remasters in the sense that it gives people a new experience. I mean, for me personally, would I have preferred the time and energy to be spent on something that's a bit more dated? Like, I would have personally, if it was my perfect world, I would rather have them remake Uncharted 1 from the ground up, because it's just been so much longer since we've had that game. It never was given the same kind of up-res as The Last of Us was, and it's an older game to start. But I mean, I get it, and they want to make that money, and I didn't know it's in development for PC as well. So this game is just going to sell like insane amounts, because also people who never got to play the original on PlayStation that have PC will also now be able to play The Last of Us for the first time. And so I really think this franchise is about to take over the world when this all comes out and becomes something just larger than life. Although it already is that in like video games, but I think just as a multimedia property, it's gonna explode. But that was the showcase from Jeff Keighley. So we actually just, after the trailer, we came back and talked on the stage for a couple more minutes, and that was kind of it. It was sort of an abrupt end, and
it was. I think that's the biggest thing with this announcement is like, it's cool, and I'm like all for Last of Us stuff, but it really felt like a strange thing to close on. I think because like, sure, it's a big deal, it's The Last of Us, but like it's not new, and that seems like a kind of like a weird momentum for me at the end of the case. But
Yeah, right. It would have. I feel like they could have even just the formatting was weird. Like if they had not
Yeah.
cut back to Jeff on the stage after the trailer, like if they would have done all the talking first and then been like, okay, and now and to close us out, thanks for watching the show, and here's some
Yeah.
gameplay from the Last of Us remake. Like that would have
Yeah.
been cooler, you know?
Yeah. That and it was, and they were just kind of at the end. They're like, okay, well, bye then, please leave. It was a little awkward. It felt a little awkward, like, you know, you were like hosting and like people over at your house and you're like tired and want to go to bed. You're like, oh, you like do that yawn and you're like, oh man, well it sure is getting late. And then they don't get the memo and they're like, yeah, keep hanging out. And you're like, oh no.
That's exactly
That
it.
is totally the vibe that was going on.
Yeah.
And it's just, you know, I understand that you can't close out every show with Elden Ring is finally here. That's not fair. But like, oh boy, just comparing the like energy and the big like bang at the end of last year versus
Mm.
like, all right, well, you know,
Mm-hmm.
I'm getting kind of sleepy.
Well, it would have been interesting to have like something, right? Like this would have been. Imagine if he had been able to close with
Yeah.
Ragnarok or something like that.
Right.
And obviously, it's again up to what's available to him to include. But yeah, just a little weird formatting. And you know the other thing. Well, just before we get off of Summer Games Fest, which was not in this recap, but I would be remiss not to bring it up. Speaking of weird formatting, was what the fuck was with that segment with The Rock advertising his energy drink and his Black Adam movie, and then like
Right.
filming it shirtless in his gym as if he just like finished a set on the bench press, and his secretary came in and was like, all right, Dwayne, you got 15 minutes to film this little promo for Summer Games Fest because Jeff needs you for something. And he's like, oh, you know what? Yeah, let's just do it now. Like I'm taking a water break, and he just like
Yeah.
filmed himself. It was so bizarre, and it felt so disconnected. And like he had this weird line that he said, like he clearly like didn't have a script or anything, and he was just kind of like, and enjoy your game, or like enjoy your games or something like that. Like he like a term that like no one would ever say. It was just such a bizarre little promo, and it felt like it almost just felt like he had to throw that in, and it wasn't even related to the rest of the presentation at all.
Well, you know what? Okay, first of all, yeah, that was really weird. I know everyone loves The Rock, but it was super weird. But like, there's always that one awkward thing that would happen every year at E3, and
Mm-hmm.
it's like Summer and Game Fest like recorded everything else, and we're like, oh no, this one like way too polished. Like we gotta fuck it up somehow.
Yeah, something weird has to happen.
Someone weird's got to show up and kind of be awkward for a bit, and so they're like, hey, Rock, you busy?" They called him up. Yeah, you're right. It was so weird, and it's not even in like any of the recaps because like it was just The Rock chilling
Yeah,
for like
and he wasn't
a
even
minute.
he wasn't even talking about anything relevant. Like he mentioned that he was the foundation in Fortnite. Well, that's great, but that season just ended, and now he's not in Fortnite currently. Like, it's just
It's not a
weird.
commercial, man.
Yeah,
I guess you gotta have your energy drinks when you're playing video games.
I guess.
I guess we keep that stereotype going, so sure.
All right, well, that was our feelings on Summer Games Fest. But before we get out of here, we also have to talk about quickly the Devolver Digital showcase that happened as well. Unfortunately, I didn't get to watch this one live, but I watched all the trailers and whatnot. So we'll go through these ones quickly. First up, we had Cult of the Lamb, which has a release date of August 11th. We've seen this one before. It kind of gives me like Don't Starve kind of vibes in terms of like the art style.
Yes.
Yeah, it looks interesting. Like I don't know if it's something that I'm like in love with, but I'm interested to see like what people think, because this seems like the kind of thing that people would love to stream on Twitch or like play in that kind of way.
I'm actually pretty hot on this game.
Mm-hmm.
I think the combat reminds me of kind of like somewhere in between something like a Death's Door and like almost Hades in a way, where like it's very like stylized visuals, but also like it looks like there's some weapons that are all very different, but it looks tight and responsive. Like
Mm-hmm.
it genuinely, like, I'm pretty hype on this game.
Yeah,
It's a roguelike, it's cool. Looks like it's got interesting bosses. Like the design is just fantastic. It does have some base building, so I'm gonna eat my words a little bit, but it also seems like it's more of a like
but
hub area you come
yeah,
back to between runs
I
that
don't know
you
if
like
that's base building in
upgrade.
the same way. That's just
So
kind of like unlocking things for your roguelike.
exactly.
Yeah,
So like maybe you want to like harvest some stuff on the farm that you've built in your base, but I don't think that's like, I think that's just like the 10-minute cooldown between runs. So
right.
this game genuinely looks awesome. I love the aesthetic. I love that it's just some like satanic demon shit, but you're also just a cute little lamb. Yeah, I was into this the first trailer I saw, and I've remained pretty excited for it.
All right, so after that we saw Angerfoot, which is wow, this was this was something else. This is definitely one of those weird kind of like how did they
This
even
is
think of
like
this kind of games?
this is the most Devolver game
Yeah,
of the
yeah,
Devolver Showcase. Like it's just
100%.
so outrageously Devolver.
Yeah, from the creators of Genital Jousting and Broforce and those
Hmm.
kind of funny humor games. But this is like your it's a first person action, kind of like I've heard people describe it as Hotline Miami, but kind of first person instead of top down.
Hmm.
And your melee is kind of like you kick instead of punching, so your character's leg is constantly like raising up into your view
Yes, and it's
and
like, you know, just a little bit too long and lanky and
yeah.
yeah.
It looks really fast paced though, and you know, kind of that accelerated Doom kind of gameplay loop. It could be fun,
Exactly.
you know, like this is yeah, it definitely has some of that weird humor. I don't know what to really think of it, but it looks entertaining if nothing else.
I think it'll do
To me.
well. I think
Yeah.
it's the kind of game you know if you're into it ahead of time, but I think it will do pretty well. And there's a lot of, you know, like, you know, shoot that barrel, everything explodes and like, you know, kick something back at an enemy kind of stuff. So
Exactly, yeah. So next up we saw Card Shark, which is something that's actually already out. And I'm really high on this game. I'm actually like this is
yeah,
probably the next thing I'm gonna buy now
yeah,
that I've
you've called
finished a
it out
couple
a few
things.
times with Card
I'm
Shark.
so excited, and I know the reviews have been pretty good. I think I'm gonna pick it up on Switch, but the whole premise of just like cheating and playing this will be a ton of fun in my opinion. And I'm not gonna say anything else because I'll probably talk about it on an upcoming podcast
Mhm.
for us. So we'll we'll talk about the next game, which I think is like you know one of my top two or three from not only from like Summer Games Fest in general, including Jeff Show,
Yeah,
which was Plucky Squire. This game,
agreed.
you know, when you look at a screenshot of what it looks like, you probably dismiss it as being like, oh, I don't know about this. But if you watch the trailer and you watch from the beginning to the end, it is like my mouth actually like I gasped visibly
Drop.
when I was
Yeah.
watching this because it starts off and you're kind of, you know, it's like this fairy tale kind of storybook and you're almost like this top down kind of Zelda combat and you know it looks pretty not generic but like your standard kind of combat, nice visuals and all that. And then all of a sudden, your character like comes out of the book and it has all of a sudden like a 3D effect and you're walking around like on the almost like in a It Takes Two style of like being little characters in a big world on this person's desk and you're all of a sudden able to then put your character inside the side of a mug and like there's a punch out style kind of boss. It looks fascinating. I'm so interested to see what they do with this.
I agree. It looks like there's so many different styles. It looks like you're never doing the same thing twice.
Hmm.
And that's really exciting in a game like this. That's obviously about like the world and the aesthetic. And it's just like, it reminds me of that Nintendo kind of approach to a game of like, the game should be fun first. And that's the most important thing. And we're just going to throw a bunch of cool, fun little like new experiences at you. And you're going to eat it up. And like, it just looks so incredibly creative and different and new and the aesthetic is adorable and like you know you puts the word like there's just so much going on like you said there's punch out and then there's like an archery kind of thing and then you're like exploring this big 3D world and then you're like you know making the word making a bridge appear because you got bridge in like part of the story and so that's like an environmental puzzle and it's just there's so much stuff packed into what seemed like it was just going to be a tiny little indie game at first and
Yeah,
I want to play this so much.
if there's one trailer that I recommend of all the games we've talked about, it would be this one to watch just
Mhm.
because of how it surprises you in terms of
Yeah,
what it shows you. Like, definitely go watch that one. No doubt. The Plucky Squire, for those that missed it the first
Plucky
time.
Squire.
And then finally for Devolver, we had Skate Story, which is another skateboarding game, which I feel like we've seen a decent amount of skateboarding games the last little bit. But this one has a very interesting art style. Your character is like made of glass or diamonds or something, and
Hmm.
there's a lot of like interesting lighting and kind of shininess going on for the tricks on this skateboard. And like it's a skateboarding game, right? I'm sure you're pretty excited as a big Tony Hawk fan. Uh, but I mean, you got to give it. The visuals are very unique for this type of game. Like usually you're in a skate park and there's like you're wearing your DC shoes and all that stuff. And this is just at least very
Hmm.
different visually and quite appealing looking, to be honest with you.
Now, so here's how I feel about this game is I think this game justifies skateboarding because to me like those Tony Hawk games are so incredibly fucking boring because you're just hanging at a skate park doing tricks and it's just like what is the gameplay to do a trick, you know? Like
It's intense.
move your I'm sure it's intense, but like there's no variety. It's just skate around these skate parks, and like I just don't get how you can play that for more than an hour and then not be bored. But this game to me, like especially this trailer, like you're not just skating around the same skate park, you're skating through environments, and the visuals are amazing. Looks like the music was really neat, and I get that the impression this is more of like a journey style game, and skateboarding is your method of transportation, and so sometimes you are like, you know, like grinding along a rail or doing something like that, but it looks like that's not like the main, like the skating is like secondary to just going through this like beautiful visual experience.
Mm-hmm.
And so it can just, I think that justifies the skating is in the fact that it looks like a cool like movement style game. But what I will say is that if it just ends up being in a skate rink and you're just doing fucking ollies all day, then um the description that the game's got will hold true for this game as it is true for every other skateboarding game, in the fact that you're skateboarding through a world of glass and pain, and that's my experience every time with skateboarding. Glass and pain.
And there you have it, folks. That's the summary of Devolver Digital Showcase for us this year. So that was that. Yeah, God, that was a lot of news to get through. So many announcements. There was a few other showcases that went on as well, but we just don't have time to go over all those announcements. There is a game I'll recommend just off the top of my head that you go look at specifically that I heard about on a different podcast today. But there was another showcase that showed a game off, and I forget the name of it, but it's essentially, you know, like those like horror mods for Resident Evil where like Thomas the Train will follow you around.
Oh yeah.
Apparently
Yeah,
there is like
one.
an indie horror game that's been made where there actually is a train that follows you around, and you have to eventually like try and find a way to kill the train that's like stalking you, and it's a horror game. So investigate that at your own will, but it sounds interesting at very least.
Okay. Is it Choo Choo Charles?
Yes, Choo Choo Charles.
Awesome. It's a spider-like train, and that, oh god.
So check that one out when you can. We of course like to close the news show out with a lighthearted kind of fun story every week. And this week, although it's not a funny story in the same way that we usually use, this is just one that is going to get us both very excited and hyped for a second. So let's read it out loud. It comes from Nintendo Life. From Ollie Reynolds, and this is a snippet from an interview with IGN from Sega's creative director Takashi Iizuka, who I guess is working on Sonic Frontiers, and was also part of the Sonic Adventure 2 team. And he was quoted as saying, there is some interest in Sonic Adventure as a series, and here's the quote. Let me clear my throat. I've mentioned in my previous interviews, but I would like to continue the Sonic Adventure series. Sonic Adventure also contains smaller open spaces known as adventure fields. I think we've used what we learned with those in this game as well, speaking about Sonic Frontiers. I haven't thought about my next game yet, but, personally, I think it'd be nice if we could use what we learn in this game with Sonic Adventure. How exciting is this? There is interest in someone from Sega to make a Sonic Adventure game. Who knows if it would be good, but man, SA2B, all-time classic, and there's a glimmer of hope for SA3B.
SA3B, I would be so stoked. Like, I think that's the only thing that could possibly happen that would ever get me excited in a Sonic game again. Like, Frontiers is so, like, it's so nothing to me right now. But Sonic Adventure 3, where they have, like, the classic, like, 3 styles of levels again, would be so hype.
It would. And imagine, like, there's a Chow Garden, it's online, you're, like, racing each other's chows, or you're, like, you know, dropping your chows off into asynchronous races and stuff.
It'd be so good if we could like share a Chow Garden but online, and like, you know, like in A2 where you'd like feed them stuff and they'd like get the traits of those animals, and like some of them were just objectively like they look so bad, and I could just see like logging on to the Chow Garden and like you fed him like gorilla arms or something stupid. It's like, no. I worked so hard to get him
ruin the Chow.
I worked so hard to get him dragon wings, now he's just got gorilla arms. And like, that would be so fun.
Oh man, yeah, it would. Well, I mean, we can hold out hope for the future, right? I mean, Frontiers, like you said, I mean, didn't look great, and who knows, how the timeline would be on whatever comes next. But if it's Sonic Adventure 3, I don't know. Like, I would struggle to think in a universe where I wouldn't buy that game, even if it did look like complete shit, because it's just one of those games, you know, you got to buy it. Oh man. All right, well, that's going to round us out for the news show today. It's been a long one, folks. We're nearly an hour and a half in, but of course, it's June. It's Summer Game Fest week. It is the big time of for gaming, so we had a bit extra time here today to talk about all this news. So next week on the show, we'll have a regular episode again. We're going to talk about, I guess, the Metal Hellsinger demo, because I think we're both going to check that one out over this time. We'll also talk about Nickelodeon All-Stars Brawl, which we're going to get together and have a little session with. So hopefully that's going to be some it'll be funny if nothing else, I'm sure. And who knows what else we'll talk about, but look forward to that. In the meantime, if you would like to get in touch with us and tell us what your favorite announcement was from the Summer Games Fest, if you disagree and you thought it was a great show overall, or if you think, you just want to tell us about your experience, how did you watch it? Was there something funny that happened to you during the showcase? Let us know at circlesandsquarespod@gmail.com or on Twitter @CNSpod. Wherever you're listening, thank you so much for leaving us a rating or a review. We really appreciate that, helping us grow the show. And until next time, everybody, we'll see you next week. So, yeah, see you then.